So hello and welcome to the first session of the Community Engaged Teaching and Learning Faculty Learning Community. I am Nicole Springer. I'm the Chief Equity Officer and Senior Director of Professional Development and Scholarship with Campus Compact, and I am thrilled to have you all with us today. As a professional home for practitioners, scholars in the field, we have a long commitment of providing development opportunities to those who do this work. We were very fortunate to have Dr. Star Plaxton-Moore as our Faculty Development Fellow last year, during which many were able to learn from her wisdom on this very topic and on other topics. And she's been gracious, and we are very grateful that she's continuing to work with us this year with a deep dive into the book that she co-wrote, The Craft of Community Engaged Teaching and Learning, A Guide for Faculty Development. Typically, I would hold up the book, but I've learned that when you have a screen on, it gets blurred, but it's a beautiful book with a blue cover. If you haven't seen it, you will probably see it during this presentation. Over the next 6 sessions, we do hope that you will learn from and with Star and each other as you build your own capacity and hone your skills in community engaged teaching and learning. My role in this is really to help facilitate your learning by being the best tech person that I know how to be and leave you in the good hands of Dr. Star Plaxton-Moore. So take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. It's great to be here with all of you. I'm really grateful to Campus Compact that they keep inviting me to do things. Sometimes we need that affirmation that we've done well enough that people want us to come back. So I was really delighted to be invited to facilitate this faculty learning community this year. It really does kind of build on and borrow from the 2-day intensive that I facilitated last year. Did anyone participate in that from here? One person, a couple people. Okay, so this session in particular is new, but some of the other stuff might be, kind of repetitive, and hopefully you can, I'll spice it up a little bit, but hopefully you also are kind of entering into it from a different space, since that was several months ago. And certainly the conversations are always changing as we invite new people into the space. And because this is a faculty learning community, a lot of our time together will really be about you connecting with and learning from each other. So that'll be a significant part of what we do. Let's see. And so this faculty learning community is shaped by the Craft of Community Engaged Learning book, as Nicole mentioned. I would say today we're kind of focusing on the chapters around scholarly identity and being a reflective practitioner, and then also building community, which is should be a huge focus of our work. And and so the book, some of you might remember, I told a little bit of a story about the book. So Marshall Welch and I co-authored this book. We originally had done kind of a research project together on faculty development practices, and we put out an article and then found that we worked pretty well together. And so he invited me to join him in putting together this book. And of course, I was super excited for that opportunity. He was sort of on his way to retirement, or maybe he even was retired at that point. He had moved up to Oregon. And so he invited me there for a couple of days to stay with him and his wife and do some of the deep work of just like getting all the ideas down and figuring out our outline. And it was such a joyful time. We, dug deeply into thinking about the book, but there was also homemade ice cream and blueberry picking and sitting out on the porch, in the evening with a glass of wine and just really, being in relationship with each other. And then the hard work sort of began, where we had to divide up and start producing these book chapters. And so, what you see is sort of a reflection of our particular moment in time, and certainly I think reflects the dynamics between Marshall and myself. And I was also in my doctoral program at the time and developing an even more critical, critical lens on the work. And, that was kind of a fun and interesting thing, where we definitely had moments of tension where I felt really strongly about something, or he felt really strongly about something. And we had to kind of navigate how that would sort of play out in the final product. And, we birthed it into the pandemic, and then we were sort of like, is anyone using it? We don't know. And then thankfully, generous people who had made the time to buy it and use it, reached out to us to let us know that it was working for them. So that was really nice to hear. And then, subsequently Campus Compact invited me to do a little bit more around the book. And if you don't already know, there's also an amazing toolkit that you can access through Campus Compact that accompanies the book that you can download there. So I guess I just wanted to give you that sort of, sometimes we don't know the story of how a publication comes into being, but I think it was, a process filled with all the things that come out of a relationship between a mentor and a mentee, two colleagues and two friends. So I guess what I'll do is I'll share my screen, and I always like to see people's faces, so I'm realizing I was gonna put these up before. So that's the picture of Marshall and me when we first got our book. We met up in Oakland. He actually came down from Oregon. We met up in Oakland to have a celebration lunch. And so we got a picture of ourselves with our book. And but now I want to make sure that we have a chance to start getting to know each other. And I know people will kind of come and go as we have sessions in the future, but hopefully within each of our sessions, you'll be able to, deeply connect with a small group of colleagues, and they can be your thought partners during the session. So usually I'm doing faculty development, at USF or other institutions for about 5 to 20 people, kind of depends on the space. And I usually like to spend a lot of time building community among the folks in those spaces. So because honestly, I'm trying to model what you all probably know is important to do in your classrooms, right? We have to build community among our students so they feel like they're supported in having challenging conversations, getting outside of campus and outside of the classroom to be able to engage meaningfully. And they need to be able to come back and process that with other people. And it's helpful to be in a relationship and to start building those bonds of trust among peers so that they can move beyond surface level conversations. And so we're going to do a little bit of that here. And of course, it's hard with a larger group of 28 on Zoom. So we'll be doing a lot of like breakout room work today. So what you'll do is Nicole will put you into groups of 4. I think that's how we'll do it. You'll be in a small group of 4. And this is a chance to start building relationships. I'm fairly certain you'll be with the same 4 people for all of the activities today. I think that's how Zoom does the breakouts. And so when you get into your breakout room, you're just going to do, kind of the typical introduction where you want to share your name, your role and affiliation, and then just a couple sentences, right? Keep it somewhat brief. A couple sentences about the course you are hoping to create or revise, or if you're not here to design a course, but you have a program, or there's other relationships you have to community engaged learning, you can share whatever is relevant from your particular positionality. So we'll go into those rooms, and I'll probably give, since we have 4 people, maybe we'll give like 6 or 7 minutes, maybe take about 1.5 minutes each to introduce yourselves, and then we'll come back and do kind of a fun and interesting group introduction activity. Nicole, I'll let you take it away whenever you are able.
Rooms are open now.
Thank you. I'm at University of San Francisco, and I'm the director of community engaged learning and McCarthy Center programs. I've been in the field for 18 years now, and all of that time at USF. So just to be clear about, my limitations, it's a Jesuit institution in San Francisco. We have undergraduate community engaged learning requirement. And so we have about 100 courses that are offered each year. that have community engaged learning. And so I do faculty development, I do our some of our partnership stewardship, and then we have some course-based and co-curricular programs that we run out of the center that I oversee. And so that's kind of my main role. And then I'm also on the board for the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement. So hopefully some of you were at our conference a couple weeks ago. I know October is filled with community engagement conferences. So it was kind of fun to get to reconnect with folks. All right, we're gonna try something new. But first, our outcomes for today, and I sort of mentioned this, it's really about you beginning to build relationships with your peers in the faculty learning community, but also as we're doing this, hopefully it's helping you think about how are you going to build relationships among the students in your course or in your programs. And so hopefully you can take a lot of what we do and kind of adapt it. And then really clarifying your own motivations and the skills and capacities and gifts that you are bringing and any existing relationships or networks of support that you are bringing into your community engaged work. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But first, we're going to keep working on building our own community and thinking about how we can build community among students. So just to give you a sense of kind of where my inspirations come from, these two quotes have been really formative for me as I think about working with communities through community engaged learning, and then also building communities among students, building community among our staff at USF, at our Public Service Center. And I've been deeply inspired by Black feminist approaches to social change. And so these quotes for me are particularly compelling, and I just wanted to kind of bring them into the space for us to sit with and hopefully be inspired by. So the first quote is Audre Lorde, and she says, "Without community, there's no liberation, but community must not mean a shedding of our differences, nor the pathetic pretense that these differences do not exist." So for me, what I take from that is, right, if we are indeed thinking of community engaged learning as a way to achieve justice, to achieve equity, to move toward liberation for folks who are experiencing oppression, then we know we have to do that in community, right? We have to build those relationships. We have to work together to make that happen. And there are inevitably going to be differences in how we do that, how we think about it, how we go about it. And so how can we hold that complexity while trying to do this work? And so that's kind of how I interpret and integrate the first quote into my thinking about community engaged learning. And then, of course, Bell Hooks talks about one of the most vital ways we sustain ourselves is by building communities of resistance, places where we know we are not alone. And, you know, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this notion of asset-based community engagement or community development. And for me, a lot of that is kind of looking for the people and places and organizations that are resisting, rejecting, dismantling unjust systems and unjust elements in our communities, and trying to create spaces for possibility and spaces for abundance. And so this Bell Hooks quote kind of just reminds me that doing this work, when we're really doing this work to advance equity and justice, part of that means resisting, rejecting some of the status quo or the way things have always been. And again, that can be lonely work if we're trying to do it individually. It can be hard work to push up against these systems. And so how can we do that together? And how can we help students understand the importance of doing this kind of change work in communities? And I guess I should say, at any point, if anyone wants to, you know, if you have a comment, if you have a question, if you want to raise your hand or just jump in, please feel free. I don't want this to be, you know, super formal. All right, so we're going to try a little activity. This is really meant for us to try to get to know each other within this bigger group. And I'm calling it Chat FLC. I haven't done this before, so we're going to see how it goes. Maybe some of you have done something similar in COVID times. And this is not to be confused with Chat GPT. This is a chance for you to use the chat to share some information about yourself. And some of it's going to be, kind of straightforward. And then we'll get a little bit juicier in the questions. So the first is, if you could just take a moment to share in the chat your discipline and or your area of expertise or areas of expertise. And you can certainly define that as broadly as you like. It could be your department. Then once you've put yours in, maybe scroll through and see if you see anyone who has an area of expertise that's similar to yours. Seeing psychology, communications, business. Ooh, a few communications, criminology, ESL, education, chemistry, public health and sociology. Wow, there's a lot of anthropology and artivism. I love that. Social work, English, wonderful. So maybe you'll see some kindred spirits on here, people who have similar disciplines, similar areas of expertise, and maybe you can just keep them in mind. You might want to reach out to them if they're not in your small group. You can compare notes about the courses you're developing. All right, so the next one is, what institution and geographic region are you coming from? And once you put yours in, scroll around. We definitely have a number of folks from UT Arlington. You guys might win the prize for the most participants in this. Mercer, Hawaii, Utah. Very exciting. All right, so maybe you see some people who are just down the road from you that you haven't met before. Maybe you see people who are on your very same campus that you've never met before. That could be possible too. All right, now we're going to get into the fun stuff. You should be able to, in the chat, use the emoji function. It's like the little happy face down on kind of the bottom left. So what 1 to 3 emojis best represent who you are? And if you, for any reason, can't use the emojis in the chat, you can list 3 labels about yourself, good dancer, book lover, whatever it is, or you can use the emojis. And then you can go through and see others and wonder what that means in some cases. I'm going to start interpreting. So maybe A sushi and red wine lover, I see. A skier. A scholar. There's a home here. I'm wondering if it's like homeowner, homebody. Sloth. Either you like sloths or you mimic sloths. Awesome. All right, one last, let's see. Actually, it's super fun to watch these pop up. Cupcakes, books, and kitties. Here's another one who I put a dancer. Seeing another dancer here. We'll go dancing the next time we go to a conference together. All right. Okay, so then the last question is a little more straightforward, a little more related to our work. In one succinct sentence, what is your greatest concern about teaching community engaged courses? Couple people talking about so much work. Definitely making sure to not overpromise on what can be delivered. Really achieving reciprocity with community partners, easier said than done. A few people have that. Student commitment. Yeah, I mean, particularly, I feel that at University of San Francisco, it's required for all of our undergraduate students. There's a number of students who are motivated for it, and then we also have a share of students who are, not so excited, not so ready to make that commitment. Ensuring the experience is high impact for students and community partners, assessment. Yeah, so I'm seeing some common themes here. Hopefully you all are scrolling through and seeing some of those too. The partnership, whether you can come together and find a shared vision. Great. Giving up some of that control, because when we send students out of the classroom, we can't control all the variables out there. Right, I'll just give another 10 seconds in case anyone's still thinking and typing. Or scrolling and reading. And the challenge of online service learning too, and the constraints around that. All right, so I'm going to make sure before we all get off of this call that I save the chat so I can come back to those concerns and challenges. We won't necessarily dig into all of them in this first session, but as we move through successive sessions, we're going to unpack those a lot more, particularly around partnerships and reciprocity and shared visions, and then also around student commitments and accountability and that sort of thing. All right, so hopefully we got to know each other more as a large group through that activity, both as individuals, but also as folks who are teaching or supporting community engaged courses. And now we're going to kind of come back to that notion of how do we build community? And in this particular session, we're trying to build community among us by talking about how we build community, if that makes sense. It's a little bit meta. And I know many of you are educators, whether you've taught community engaged courses or not. I suspect that you probably do attend to some degree to building that sense of community among students in different ways, and you might have different strategies and things like that. So I'm going to, in a moment, Nicole will put you back into these small groups. And you can think about it from your role as an educator, but certainly outside of your professional role too, within your family, within your community, within your classrooms, what practices, activities, and strategies do you use to nurture relationships and build community? So that's going to be the question that will fuel your conversation. Just to share some examples. So I teach a course on leadership for civic engagement. And one of the things I like to do within the first couple of sessions, I have the students listen to this podcast. The podcast is called the series is called Code Switch, and it's one particular episode where they talk about, I think it's called By Any Other Name, and it's two Black Nigerian women who moved to the United States as children and grew up here, and they're having a conversation with each other as friends about kind of the evolution of their relationship to their names. And how, there was a point where they changed their names to be more like easier to pronounce for, the folks in the United States. And then how they kind of reclaim their names. And so it's this really beautiful story of the power of their names and how, in some ways they were trying to hold them sacred by not wanting them to be said incorrectly, and kind of it sort of pushes back on some assumptions people have about, like someone changes their name to assimilate or that kind of thing, but rather kind of gives a more nuanced perspective of it. And so I'll have the students listen to that podcast as homework, and then we'll come in and have conversations about the students' names and where they come from and their relationships to their names and how they prefer, how they want them to be said. And it's a way to start building community among our students around that. So that's an example from me. And I'm hoping you might also have examples of different activities or things that you do. And what you'll do is you'll use the Jamboard, and I think Nicole will put the link into the chat. And then you can add your group's ideas in here. So I also put an example here. Hopefully folks are familiar with the Jamboard. You can just click on this little thing here, and it'll give you a sticky note to type into. So another thing that seems pretty common, in terms of building community, is when we can somehow come together over food, right? Even if it's everyone bringing their own food or bringing in something small, sharing a meal or sharing food is a way to build community. So those are a couple of examples, and let's see. You'll go into hopefully your same groups, and then take some time to share and discuss, and then maybe someone can be the scribe and
so tactical question start. Should we be on the frame that aligns with our group number?
Sure, you could do that. That's probably a good idea if you know how to do that. Otherwise, you can also just add them anywhere. Maybe just find a page that's not being used.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Through direct experience that the work of community engaged teaching and research is challenging, right? It has all this messiness to it because you're going outside of the classroom, you're going outside of the lab. There's relationships involved, there's expectations involved, communications are needed. There's something that you're trying to co-create typically. And we also know that at most of our institutions, this work is underappreciated. It might go unrecognized. And so it is, highly likely that people can burn out from this. If you're not truly rooted in, what are your inspirations? What are your motivations? What is guiding you to really embrace and take on this work? Then you could lose sight of it, right? And burn out. So we're going to spend a little time in this next section just grounding ourselves in our individual inspirations for this. So let me share my screen again. And I think Nancy had to leave. I'm kind of sad because she was just talking about Adrienne Marie Brown. But we're going to do an individual activity. You'll have some time, and this will also, you'll have time if you need to do a bio break, because you'll be doing a little bit of independent work. So what you'll do is come up, well, I'll share the activity in a minute, but maybe I'll start with just my inspiration. So I'm going to share 3 slides with you that just are kind of showcase some of the things that are really guiding my practice right now. I'm really inspired, and this came mostly out of grad school, but has continued as critical scholars continue to produce, publications that I find fascinating and important. So I'm really trying to root my work in activist scholarship, like critiquing our institutions and how they sort of perpetuate settler colonialism, racism, and what capacities we have within these institutions, or what capacities these institutions could have to shape a different path. So these are some of the books that have really inspired me. Obviously, I shared the bell hooks quote with you earlier, so Teaching Community. This one was introduced to me when I was early in writing my dissertation, Dissident Knowledge in Higher Education. It has some amazing chapters in there by Sandra Grande, Eve Tuck. I think there's an interview with Noam Chomsky. So that's a great one. And then No Study Without Struggle. Actually, I was in a study group for Imagining America a couple years back. I think it was during the pandemic, and they shared the first chapter of this book as a resource for conversation. And now I bring it in and actually assign it in my class. And A Third University is Possible by Law Paperson. And then my colleague actually at USF, Dr. Colette Can, co-authored this book, The Activist Academic. She was one of our keynote speakers for the IRSlice virtual conference a couple years ago. So these books are really, I feel like they've completely reshaped how I understand universities and my own university and community engagement and our relationships to the community. So that's definitely guiding my work. And then this is where, and I think others are familiar with Adrienne Marie Brown's Emergent Strategy, which is a social change framework. I used it to frame my dissertation. It was such a powerful framework for me. I won't go through all these principles on the left, but they're principles that I have tried to integrate into how I live my life, basically, but it's certainly how I try to do the work of community engagement. And we actually, as a staff at our public service center, we actually used her book to help us find a path forward in our strategic planning process a couple years back. We were really struggling with not feeling like the process was authentic, and then we grounded ourselves in this text and in this framework, and were able to kind of move forward in a more kind of authentic way. And then lastly, of course, I just love being in relationship with folks, learning from people, having joyful connections with each other. You might recognize some of the people here. Nicole Springer is hiding back here in this photo. This is all women who have gotten or are in the process of getting their doctorates, who are in community engagement. And then these are some of my community partners, students, colleagues from USF, some of our staff, some faculty here. These are my kids. Of course, I feel like we have a responsibility to hand over a more healed earth, a more healed society to future generations. So I'm always holding them in mind as we do this work. And then down here is our community partners. So those are the 3 kind of biggest inspirations for me as I go through the challenges of community engagement. They're the ones that I kind of keep coming back to keep me going. So what I'll have you do is probably spend about 15 to 20 minutes coming up with your own inspirations. What's inspiring you in your community engagement, right? It could be people, ideas, theories, frameworks. What I loved about, what Julie just shared right before, right? How are we recognizing that our ancestors, our elders, the folks who came before us are really, an inspiration. And so you'll have a chance to just kind of think through that individually in your own reflection. If you want to make slides, you can do that. If you just want to, journal, write down some notes, whatever makes sense for you in terms of just being able to sort of capture and document your inspirations. And then I'll give you probably about 20 minutes to work on this, take your bio break also, and then we'll bring you back into your small groups so you can share out with each other. Before we get into small groups, before you go off into your individual time. So we'll just do individual time and then I'll put you into small groups. Any questions? And certainly I'll stick around in case you have any. So my time is 1:10. Your time is something 10, depending on where you're at. Let's reconvene at 1:30. So you can come back and turn your screen back on or just come back to your computer. And then that's when Nicole and I will put you into your breakout group. So coming back here at 1:30. All right. Feel free to just turn off your screen, and it's about kind of tapping into your superpower and coming up with a mission statement for yourself. And we didn't get to that. Nicole and I are going to talk about, we might send it to you after the fact in case you want to work through the worksheet on that and kind of do some deeper self-reflection. But for now, we can just, we can transition to ending a little bit early. I will say, let me share my screen one more time. So our future sessions will have a little bit more content. So if all of this interactivity and individual activity isn't necessarily your thing, there'll be a little bit more balance in future sessions in terms of I'll provide, more information and more content. Our next session is December 14th, and that will be Community Engaged Course Design Foundations and Frameworks. So that one will be a little bit more practical, but I'll definitely build in some time for you to, kind of have a bit of an idea lab where you can start getting your thoughts down around course design or redesign for whatever you're trying to accomplish. So just wanted to put this out there. Hopefully you're able to rejoin us for December 14th, and then we'll, continue to have our monthly sessions, and we'll have, I think is it our 5th session maybe, aligns with the Campus Compact Conference. So we'll do that one. We'll have kind of an in-person version and probably figure out how folks can call in as well. Nicole and I will work on what that can look like, but it'll be really exciting to hopefully see many of you physically there, where we can continue to build community among our faculty learning community. So Nicole, anything else you want to say by way of closure?
I just want to say thank you to you, Star, and thank you to everyone for your great participation and rolling with us as we, work to get you all the information in a short amount of time.
All right. Thank you all for sticking around, for going through all the activities with us, and sharing your wisdom and insights with each other. And we'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
Thanks, Star.